There's a volcanic situation unfolding in Iceland right now, but to understand that, we have to understand a little bit of the geology of Iceland and how it was formed. So Iceland sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is an area in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where two tectonic plates are being pulled apart. So new crust is always being formed there. It also sits above a plume that's bringing hot material up to help form the island of Iceland. So Iceland is truly the land of volcanoes. There's more than 130 volcanoes in Iceland, and 32 of them are active. That doesn't mean that they're erupting right now. That means that they have been active in the fairly recent geologic past, so in the past few hundred years. So what's happening now? This area down here is called the Reykjanes Peninsula, and it was actually pretty volcanically quiet for about 800 years, but then in 2021 there was an eruption. And then there was another one in a different place in 2022, and another in a slightly different area in 2023, earlier this year. And now we're having this massive increase in earthquakes in a slightly different part of the peninsula. So since late October, there has been, when I say an increase in seismicity, I mean like thousands and thousands and thousands of earthquakes, sometimes thousands of earthquakes a day. Many of them have been fairly large, like a magnitude 5. So why do earthquakes matter? Earthquakes in areas where we have volcanoes give us really big hints and clues as to what's happening underneath the ground. So as the hot rock, the magma, comes up, it has to break the rocks in order to make room for itself. And the breaking of the rocks, those are the earthquakes. And so the magma is going to intrude along areas of pre-existing weakness in the rock. Now it could be along the rock layers, so like squeezing in between. And when that happens, it's called a sill. And that's the sort of the horizontal movement. And if it cuts across the rock layers and moves vertically, that's called a dike. You might have heard in the media talking about magma tunnels. That's just a miscommunication as people are changing between languages. When you hear magma tunnel, that's really a dike. So as the magma is moving, it's causing the rocks to break and causing these earthquakes, and we can track where those earthquakes are in time. And so what we've seen is that these earthquakes are moving from the northeast towards the southwest. So that's the direction that the magma is going. And in some places, they've even gotten as close to about 800 meters from the surface. That's when we start to worry, right? Because the closer it gets to the surface, that's like when you start to get eruptions. We have not had an eruption in this area yet. But there are other clues that we have besides earthquakes that we can use to determine what's happening in volcanic systems. We can look at how the ground is changing, called ground deformation. And so as more of this magma is coming into the subsurface, it causes the ground to swell and bulge or inflate. And we can measure that using tilt meters, we can measure it using GPS, I talked about that in my last video, and we can also measure it using satellite data. So here's different satellite data that's showing us how the ground in this area has deformed. So pause to read. All right, what we know so far, the earthquakes are moving towards the southwest, the ground is deforming in some places quite a lot. Unfortunately, in this area where the magma is headed, there's a town called Grindavik, and it's gone directly underneath the town. So there's been a lot of ground deformation in Grindavik. There's also been a lot of earthquakes there, so there's been some significant damage. Fortunately, Icelandic authorities evacuated the town a few days ago, so there's no people there, which was a really good call. So what's going to happen next? Nobody knows, and anybody that says differently doesn't know what they're talking about. They can model what's happening, but we can't know for sure what exactly will happen. There are educated guesses that we can make. So there could be no eruption. That's a possibility. As of right now, there's less earthquakes than there have been. I think there were something like 800 over the past 24 hours, and that's a slowdown. There's been a slowdown in the rate at which the ground is deforming. So all of that could indicate that it's all coming to a close. But in the last 3 eruptions, we saw the same sort of signal where there were less earthquakes right before the eruption. So this could also be the calm before the storm. And that means that we could have an eruption, lava could emerge at the surface from anywhere along that 15-kilometer corridor where we know that the magma has moved along that dike system, that injection. That also means it could come up inside of the town of Grindavik, which would be horrible because those are people's homes and businesses. People live there. There's a slight possibility that it could actually erupt underneath the ocean. Some of the earthquakes have extended out underneath the water. If that happens, then when you have the hot rock come in contact with the cold water, it can create kind of an explosive situation, but explosive like this, not explosive like this. So there's lots of different possibilities, and we are watching. Scientists are keeping a very close eye on what's happening, and the Icelandic authorities are putting out a lot of really good information. So beware misinformation. There is a lot of it out there. A lot of people are looking for clicks. A lot of people are sensationalizing the situation, which is really just not helpful. I'll include the link in the comments. This is the place that you should go to get good information, and they do update it regularly. Another word of caution: volcanic eruptions can be really interesting and really exciting, but we need to remember, especially when we're talking about the town of Grindavik, like, this is someone's community. These people have been displaced from their homes, and they're watching along with the rest of us to see what might happen. So we need to approach this situation with care and empathy, because these are people's real lives, and what we do and how we act can make a difference. So we're watching the eruption. Make sure to always check your sources, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens next.